Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Noise. I'm Ellie, and I'm really happy that you're here. First of all, I just want to say thank you for listening to this second episode, or maybe it's your first, who knows? Whether you've been here since day one or you've only just discovered this podcast, I'm genuinely grateful that you're here. Starting something new is always a little scary. You spend hours thinking about it, planning it, wondering if anyone will actually listen. And then one day you simply hit publish. That's exactly where I am right now. I honestly have no idea where this podcast is going to lead, as I already mentioned in the last episode. Maybe it'll stay small. Maybe one day thousands of people will be listening, or maybe it'll become something completely different from what I imagine today. And strangely enough, I'm okay with not knowing because I didn't start Beyond the Nice because I expected instant success. I started because I wanted to create something meaningful. A place where we can slow down, ask better questions, and have conversations that don't disappear after 30 seconds. For example, on TikTok or Instagram. If this podcast reaches one person and one episode gives them something to think about, then I already feel like it's worth it. So whether you're listener number 5 or listener number 5,000 someday, I just want to say thank you for being here. So now let's talk about something I've been thinking about a lot lately, maybe a little bit too much. And I've been thinking about, are we actually living or are we just keeping up? I've been thinking about this question for quite a while now. Not because I suddenly had some big realization, but because it kept showing up in small moments. Moments that at first didn't seem important to me. Like driving somewhere and realizing I couldn't remember half of the journey because my mind had been somewhere else the entire time. Or making myself a cup of coffee only to notice that I was already thinking about the next 5 things I had to do before I had even taken the first sip. Or laying in bed at night completely exhausted, wondering why I felt so tired even though I hadn't done anything physically demanding. Not nothing. Not anything the whole day. I'm just laying there and like, ugh, I'm so exhausted. I could sleep for days, weeks. And maybe you've experienced it too. It's almost as if we're constantly running without ever asking ourselves where where we're actually going, like where does this lead to? And the strange thing is that nobody tells us to live this way, at least not directly, because no one wakes up in the morning and says, today I want to feel stressed, today I want to rush through every moment. But somehow that's exactly what happens. We wake up, we check our phones, we reply to messages, we look at mails, we scroll through social media, we compare ourselves to people we never met before. And before we've even had breakfast, our minds are already full. It's almost like we never get the chance to wake up slowly anymore. I remember when I was younger, weekends felt different. Like a lot, a lot different. There wasn't this constant pressure to always be available. I didn't have a phone. I had a simple flip phone back then when I was a child. But like, I could leave this flip phone anywhere at home and nobody expected an answer within 5 minutes when someone called. You know, if someone wanted to talk to you, they had to wait, or they would simply come to your house and ask if you could play. Now it feels like waiting has become something we're almost afraid of. Everything has to be instant: food, entertainment, shopping, replies, success, even our own happiness. We're always looking for the next thing that's supposed to make us feel complete. For example, the next achievement, next vacation, next relationship, the next promotion, the next version of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with having goals. Goals give us directions. They motivate us. They help us grow. But sometimes I wonder if we become so focused on what's next that we've forgotten to appreciate what's now. For example, I catch myself doing this all the time. I tell myself I relax after this week. Then the week ends and another busy week begins. I'll be happier once I finish this project. Then another project appears. I'll start taking better care of myself when life slows down. But life rarely slows down on its own. If anything, it keeps speeding up, for me at least. And maybe that's why so many people feel like they're constantly chasing something they never quite reach. Not because they're failing, but because the finish line keeps moving forward. There's always another milestone, another expectation, another reason to believe that happiness is just one more step away. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but maybe, and just maybe, you're allowed to stop running for a moment. Not forever, just long enough to ask yourself one simple question: what am I rushing towards? And maybe an even more important one: what am I rushing past? Because life isn't only made up for the big moments, it's the ordinary ones that quietly become our memories. The coffee you drink on a slow morning, a conversation with a friend that lasts longer than expected, a walk without headphones, watching the sunset without feeling the need to take a picture of it, laughing so hard that you forgot to check your phone. Those moments seem small while they're happening, but years later, they're often the ones we remember. Not because they were spectacular, but because we were actually present for them. And I think presence has become one of the rarest things in modern life. We've we're physically in one place, but mentally somewhere else. We're always planning, worrying, thinking about what comes next. I know that feeling because I lived it. And to be honest, I'm still learning how to let go of it. I don't think this is something you solve overnight. Definitely not, because you don't wake up and be like, oh, I'm just going to be present all day to the people that want my time. It's more like a habit you slowly have to unlearn, a reminder that life isn't waiting for some perfect future version of yourself. It's happening right now, in this moment, while you're listening to this, while I'm recording it. And I think that's something worth remembering. I think one of the biggest reasons we feel like we're constantly trying to keep up is because we have more success, access to other people's life than any generation before us. Think about it for a second. Before social media, your world was mostly made up of the people around you. For example, your family, friends, classmates, coworkers. Now, before you even finish your morning coffee, you're probably seeing someone getting engaged, someone buying their dream house, someone traveling to Bali, someone starting a business, someone running a marathon, and someone who's somehow managed to wake up at 5 in the morning with a perfectly organized life, and it's only 9 a.m. for you. When you really stop and think about it, that's a lot for one brain to process. We're constantly exposed to hundreds, sometimes thousands of moments from other people's life. And even when we know that social media only shows a small part of reality, it still affects us. I know it affects me for a reason. I'm not on social media anymore that much because I know it's not good for me and it drags me down more than gives me positive vibes. There have been times when I've opened Instagram just to relax for a few minutes, and somehow, 10 minutes later, I closed the app feeling like I wasn't doing enough with my own life. Nothing had actually changed. My life was exactly the same as it had been 10 minutes earlier, but somehow my perspective had changed. Suddenly, I wasn't looking at my own progress anymore. I was measuring myself against someone else's highlight reel. And comparison is such a strange thing because no matter where you are in life, there's always going to be someone who's further ahead in one area, someone who earns more, who travels more, someone who's in a relationship, or someone who's single and completely happy with it, or someone who seems more confident, or someone who appears to have everything figured out. If we always compare ourselves to the next person, we'll never feel like we've arrived because there's always another person to compare ourselves to. But here's something I've been trying to remind myself lately. Just because someone else's life looks beautiful doesn't mean yours isn't. Those two things can exist at the same time. Someone else's success doesn't take away from your own journey. Someone else's happiness doesn't reduce your chance of finding yourself. Life isn't a competition. At least, I don't think it was ever meant to be. Somewhere along the way, we've started treating life like a race. Graduate by a certain age, get a good job, find a partner, buy a house, travel enough, make enough money, build the perfect life. And if you're behind in one of those areas, it can feel like you're failing. But who decides on the timeline? Seriously, who made those rules? Because when you really think about it, everyone's path is completely different. Some people discover what they love at 18, others at 40. Some people meet the love of their life in college, others after a divorce. Some people change careers 3 times before they find something that feels right. None of those stories are wrong. They're just different. And yet we spend so much time worrying that we're behind. Behind who? Behind what? I've asked myself the question more than once, especially on days when it feels like everyone else was moving forward while I was standing still. But standing still isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes standing still gives us a chance to notice things have been running past. Sometimes it's exactly what you need before taking your next step. I also realized that social media has changed the way we define success. It became so visible. For example, followers, views, likes, numbers, everything can be measured nowadays. And while there's nothing wrong with celebrating achievements, I sometimes wonder if we've started confusing visibility with value. The most meaningful parts of life usually are in public. No one sees the quiet conversations that change us. No one sees the difficult decisions we make. No one sees the nights we spend questioning ourselves. No one sees the small moments where we choose kindness, patience, or courage. Those moments don't usually go viral, but there's often the moment that shape us the most. Maybe success isn't about having the loudest life. Maybe it's about building a life that feels meaningful to you, even if no one else sees it. That's something I'm still learning, and honestly, I think I always will be. I think one of the hardest things about living in a world that moves so fast is that we've started to connect our value with our productivity. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned that being busy means being important, that resting means being lazy, that slowing down means falling behind. And I don't think most of us consciously chose this mindset. It's something we absorbed from school, society, watching other people, seeing what gets celebrated. We celebrate the person who works the longest hours, the person who is always available, the person who's constantly achieving something new. And of course, ambition is a beautiful thing. Wanting to grow is a beautiful thing. Wanting to create something meaningful is a beautiful thing. But there's a difference between working towards something you love and constantly trying to prove that you're enough. And I think a lot of people don't realize how exhausting the second one is. Because when your worth depends on what you accomplish, there's never really a moment where you can relax. Even success becomes stressful. Because after one achievement, there's immediately another question. What's next? What else can I do? What else can I improve? What else do I need to reach? It's like climbing a mountain where the top keeps moving further away, and eventually you forget to look around and notice the view. I've experienced this in smaller ways. Sometimes I finish something I've worked really hard on, and instead of allowing myself to feel proud for a moment, my brain immediately moves to the next thing, my next goal, my next responsibility, my next problem to solve. And later, I realized I never actually celebrated the moment I was waiting for. I was already chasing the next one. Maybe you've experienced it too. Maybe you've achieved something you once dreamed about, and after a short moment of happiness, it became normal. And suddenly you needed something new to feel fulfilled again. That's not because we're ungrateful. I don't think that's the reason. I think it's because humans are naturally adaptable. We get used to things. A new achievement becomes our normal. A new situation becomes our normal. A new version of ourselves becomes our normal. And that's why appreciation is such an important practice. Because sometimes we don't need more. Sometimes we need to notice more. Notice what is already there, the people who support us, the experience we've had, the progress we've made, and the person we've become. Because growth isn't only about becoming someone new. Sometimes growth is recognizing how far you've already come. I think we're often much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. If a friend came to you and said, "Oh, I feel behind in life. I feel like I'm not doing enough." Most of us wouldn't respond by telling them they're failing, falling behind. We would probably remind them of everything they have achieved. We would tell them they're doing the best. We would tell them their journey is different. But when it's our own life, we suddenly become much harsher. We expect ourselves to be perfect, to always know what to do, to never struggle, to never feel lost. And that's impossible. Let's be honest. Being human means being uncertain sometimes. It means having days where you feel motivated and days where you don't. It means changing your mind, taking breaks, not always having a clear plan. I actually think some of the most important periods in life are the ones where we feel a little lost. Because those moments force us to ask questions. Who am I? What do I actually want? Am I doing this because it matters to me? Or because I feel like I'm supposed to? Those questions aren't always comfortable, but they can lead us somewhere meaningful. Sometimes the life we're chasing isn't even the life we truly want. We're chasing an idea of success that someone else has created for us. And it takes courage to ask questions. It takes courage to say, maybe I don't want what everyone else wants. Maybe my definition of a good life looks different. Or maybe I don't need to prove myself all the time. I think that's one of the most important things we can learn. A meaningful life doesn't have to look impressive. It has to feel honest. I don't think that's something we've I think that's something we forget in a world where everything is like displayed on social media. Because when everything becomes a performance, it becomes difficult to know what is real and what's not. So maybe the question isn't how can I do more? Maybe the question should be why do I feel like I always need to do more? And that's a much deeper question. I also think another reason why so many of us feel like we're constantly trying to keep up is because we're afraid of missing something. And the fear has a name. I think everyone heard it once or had it once the feeling on their own. It's FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's a phrase we hear a lot, but I think there's more behind it than just wanting to know what our friends are doing. Because at its core, FOMO is not really about missing an event. It's about the fear that life is happening somewhere else without us. That somewhere someone is experiencing something better, more exciting, more meaningful, and we're not there. Social media has made this feeling so much stronger because we're constantly reminded of everything we aren't doing. A friend is traveling, someone is at a concert, someone is celebrating an achievement, someone is surrounded by people having fun. And even though we know we're only seeing a small part of their life, our brain doesn't always remember that. Our brain just sees the image, the smile, the moment, the experience. And suddenly we start asking ourselves questions. Am I doing enough? Am I making enough memories? Am I wasting my time? This one is what I often think about. Or should I be somewhere else? And sometimes that can create a strange feeling where we're not even unhappy with with your own life. But you're constantly wondering if there's a better version happening somewhere else. I've definitely felt that before. There have been moments where I was perfectly content. I was having a quiet evening, maybe watching a movie, reading a little, just enjoy being alone, sometimes a little time off. And then I would open my phone. 5 minutes later, I would see other people doing something completely different than I was doing at that evening. And suddenly, my peaceful evening felt like I was missing out. But the reality is, I wasn't missing anything. I was simply experiencing something different. And I think that's an important distinction. Different doesn't mean worse. A quiet night at home isn't less valuable than a night out. A slow morning isn't less meaningful than a busy one. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. But we've created this idea that if something isn't exciting, visible, or shareable, then it somehow doesn't count. And I think that's a pretty dangerous mindset to us. Because some of the most beautiful moments in life are the ones nobody else sees. The conversations you have with someone when there's no camera. The walk you take just because you need fresh air. The morning where you make coffee and sit quietly for 10 minutes. The random laugh you share with someone you love. Those moments don't need an audience to matter. Actually, I think some moments become more special because nobody else knows about them. They're just yours. And maybe that's something we've forgotten. Not everything needs to be documented. Not everything needs to become content. Not every experience needs to prove that it happened. Sometimes it's enough that you were there. I think about how often we interrupt our own experience because we want to capture them. We're at a beautiful place, but we're thinking about the perfect picture. We're having a meaningful conversation, but we're thinking about how we should explain it later. We're watching a sunset, but we're looking through a screen instead of actually looking at the sky. And I'm not saying taking pictures is bad. I love taking pictures. I think memories are beautiful. But there's a difference between capturing a moment and missing the moment because you're trying to capture it. And maybe finding balance means learning when to put the camera down, when to stop sharing, when to simply exist. Because at the end of our lives, I don't think we wish we had checked our phones more. I don't think we wish we had spent more time worrying about what everyone else was doing. I think we remember the moments where we truly were present. The people we loved, the places we explored, the conversations that changed us, the times we felt completely ourselves. And that leads to something else I've been thinking about. Maybe the opposite of FOMO isn't having everything. Maybe the opposite of FOMO is being fully present with what you already have. It's realizing, like, this moment is enough. This life is enough. I don't need to be somewhere to have a meaningful life. Because the truth is, we will always miss something. There will always be another party, another opportunity, another trend, another place we haven't been, an experience we haven't had. That's just part of being human. We cannot experience everything. And maybe accepting that is actually freedom. Because when you stop trying to experience everything, you finally have the space to appreciate something. One thing, one conversation, one moment, right here, right now. And maybe that's where life actually happens. I think also one of the biggest pressure people feel today is the pressure to find their purpose. We hear this word everywhere. Purpose. Find your passion, follow your dreams, do what you love, create a meaningful life. And of course, there's something beautiful about the idea. Wanting to live a life that feels meaningful is a very human desire. Nobody wants to wake up every day feeling disconnected from their own life. Nobody wants to feel like they're just going through the motions. But sometimes I wonder if we've turned purpose into another thing we have to achieve, another box we have to check. Almost like there's a secret moment where everything suddenly becomes clear. Like one day we will wake up and think, this is it. This is exactly what I meant to do. And maybe that happens for some people, but I don't think it happens for everyone. And I think that's important to talk about because there's so many people who feel lost simply because they haven't found one single thing they're passionate about. They look around and see people who seem to have a clear direction. Someone who always knew what I wanted to become a doctor. Someone who started a business at a very young age. Someone who turned a hobby into a career. And they think, why don't I know my thing yet? So, but maybe life isn't about finding one perfect thing. Maybe it's about discovering small things that matter. Maybe purpose isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you build. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to discover who we are, but we forget that we are constantly becoming someone new. The person you are today is not the same person you were 5 years ago. Your interests changed, priorities, dreams. And that's not a sign that you're confused. That's a sign that you're alive. I used to think changing my mind meant I had failed. Like, if I started something and later realized it wasn't right for me, I had wasted time. But now that I'm older, I see it a little different. Every experience teaches you something, even the things that don't work out or the path you leave behind. Even the moment where you realize this isn't actually what I want. Because knowing what you don't want is also a valuable information. Sometimes we discover ourselves through trying things, being curious, saying yes, making mistakes, through exploring too. And I think curiosity plays such a big role in finding meaning because when you're curious, you pay attention. You notice what excites you, you notice what gives you energy, you notice the moment where you feel most like yourself. And maybe your purpose isn't hidden somewhere far away. Maybe there are clues in your everyday life. The conversation you never get tired of having, the topics you could talk about for hours. For example, for me, because I started this podcast, because I can talk for hours on different topics. The things you naturally want to learn more about. The moment where time seems to move differently. Those small signals matter. I also think we need to redefine what a meaningful life looks like. Because sometimes we only recognize certain types of success. For example, a big career, a large audience, a lot of money, or a visible achievement. But there are so many meaningful lives that don't look impressive from the outside. For example, someone who created a loving home, someone who's there for their family, who helps people quietly, or someone who brings kindness into every room they enter, someone who chooses a simple life because it makes them happy. Those lives matter. They just don't always get celebrated online. Maybe that's because we live in a world where everything is measured by visibility. If people don't see it, did it happen? If nobody knows about it, does it matter? I think the answer is yes. Some of the most important things we do in life will never be posted. They will never receive likes. They will never become a story that thousands of people see. But they can still change someone's life. A kind word, conversation, showing up for someone, choosing patience when it's easier to be angry. Those moments might seem small, but small moments create the person we become. And maybe purpose is not always about doing something extraordinary. Maybe purpose is about bringing meaning into ordinary things. Maybe it's about the way you treat people, the way you approach your work, the way you spend your time, the way you show up in your own life. I think we're often searching for a huge answer when maybe the answer is hidden in smaller questions. For example, what makes me feel alive? What kind of person do I want to become? What matters to me when nobody is watching? Those questions might not give us instant answers, but maybe they guide us, and maybe that's enough for the beginning. Life is not a test where we have to figure everything out before time runs out. It's a journey, and journeys are not meant to be completely predictable. Sometimes the most beautiful parts are the things we never planned. I think after talking about all this, the obvious question is, but what do we actually do? How do we slow down in a world that constantly tells us to speed up? How do we find peace when everything around us is competing to our attention? And honestly, I don't think there's one perfect answer. I don't think there is a magical routine, a single habit, or one secret that suddenly changes everything. I think it's about small choices, small moments where we decide to come back to ourselves. Because maybe slowing down doesn't mean changing your entire life. Maybe it means changing the way you experience the life you already have. For me, I think one of the biggest things I've had to learn is that being present is a skill. It's not something that automatically happens, especially now. Our attention is constantly being trained to move from one thing to the next. A notification appears, we check it. A thought appears, we follow it. A video ends, another one starts. We're always moving, always consuming, and always reacting. So being present actually requires intention. It requires us to choose where our attention goes. And I think that's one of the most valuable things we can learn. Because our attention is our life. Think about that. Whatever receives your attention receives your time. And your time is literally your life. So if we constantly give our attention away without thinking about it, we are also giving away parts of our life. That doesn't mean we need to delete every app, disappear from the internet, and live in a cabin somewhere in the mountains. Although sometimes the idea sounds pretty peaceful, but I think balance is more realistic. Maybe it's about creating small spaces where we can reconnect with ourselves. A walk without checking your phone every 2 minutes. A meal where you actually taste your food. A morning where you don't immediately fill your mind with information. A few minutes of silence before the day begins. These things seem simple, almost too simple. But maybe simple things are actually what we need. Because we've become so used to complexity that we sometimes overlook the obvious. Another thing I've been thinking about is how uncomfortable silence has become. Many people are afraid of being alone with their thoughts, and I understand why. When everything becomes quiet, sometimes things come up. Thoughts we've been avoiding, questions we've been ignoring, feelings we've been distracting ourselves from. And I think that's one reason we keep ourselves busy. Sometimes being busy is easier than being honest. If we are constantly occupied, we don't have to ask difficult questions. We don't have to face uncertainty. We don't have to sit with ourselves. But those quiet moments can actually teach us a lot because you can't understand yourself if you never spend time with yourself. I think getting to know yourself is one of the most important relationships you will ever have. And like any relationship, it requires time. You have to listen, you have to pay attention, you have to notice what you need, what makes you happy, what drains you, what you believe, what you actually want. Not what you think you should want, not what looks impressive, not what make the other person approve of you, but genuinely feels what feels right for you. And I think that's harder than ever today because there are so many voices telling us who we should become, be more productive, be more successful. Um Also like look better, earn more, achieve more, improve constantly. And again, none of those things are automatically bad. Wanting to grow is beautiful. Wanting to improve is beautiful. But growth should not come from the belief that you are currently not enough. You can want to become better while still appreciating who you are today. Those two things can exist together. I think sometimes we treat ourselves like a project that is never finished. Always something to fix, always something to improve, always something missing. But maybe we're not projects. Maybe we're people, and people are allowed to rest. People are allowed to have slow seasons. People are allowed to change direction. People are allowed to simply exist. One thing I've been trying to remind myself is this: you don't have to earn every moment of peace. You don't have to finish everything before you deserve a break. You don't have to become a completely different person before you can appreciate your life. You are allowed to enjoy the process, even while you're still growing, even while you're still figuring things out, even while you don't have all the answers. Maybe because the goal was never to become someone who has already everything under their control. Maybe the goal is to become someone who can handle life as it comes. Someone who can experience both the good and difficult moments without constantly running away from them. Someone who can be present, someone who can listen. Someone who can slow down enough to actually notice that life is happening right now, not someday, not after the next achievement, and not after everything is perfect. Exactly right now. I think one of the biggest reasons we struggle to slow down is because we're constantly trying to control what happens next. We as humans want certainty, we want the plan, we want to know that the decisions we're making will lead us exactly where we hope they will. And honestly, that makes sense. Uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. Not knowing can feel scary because humans naturally look for safety. We want to understand things. We want to predict things. We want to feel prepared. But the truth is, life doesn't work that way. No matter how much we plan, there will always be things we cannot predict. There will always be unexpected changes, unexpected opportunities, unexpected endings, or unexpected beginnings. And I think a lot of stress comes from fighting against that reality. We spend so much energy trying to create a future where nothing goes wrong, But maybe a better goal is not creating a life where nothing goes wrong. Maybe it's because it's becoming someone who knows they can handle things when they do. Because difficult moments are not proof that on the wrong path. Sometimes they're simply part of the path. I think about how many times I've looked back at situations that felt impossible at the time, moments where I thought, how am I going to get through this? And somehow I did. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not exactly how I imagined, but I learned something. I grew and I changed. And sometimes the things I was afraid of became the things that taught me the most. I think we underestimate ourselves. We often focus on avoiding failure, that we forget how capable we actually are. We forget all the difficult moments we've already survived, all the situations we once thought we couldn't handle, all the versions of ourselves we had to leave behind to become who we are today. Growth is not always obvious while it's happening. Sometimes it feels like confusion, or like losing direction, or even standing still. But even when nothing seems to be happening, something can still be changing inside you. And I think that's important because we live in a culture that loves visible progress. We like clear results, clear achievements, clear before and after stories. But real growth is usually much quieter. It's the moment you react differently than you would have before. In the moment you choose peace over proving a point. In the moment you forgive yourself. In the moment you finally understand something that used to hurt. Nobody sees those moments, but they matter. I also think we need to talk about mistakes because so many people are afraid of making the wrong choice. For example, choosing the wrong career, moving to the wrong place, starting the wrong project, trusting the wrong person. And yes, sometimes we will make choices we later regret. But also, this is also a part of being human. But I don't think a wrong decision means your life is ruined. Sometimes the path only becomes clear because you take a few wrong turns. Imagine driving somewhere you've never been before. You might miss an exit. You might take a longer road. You might need to turn around. But you don't decide the entire journey was a failure because you made one wrong turn. Life works the same way. We're constantly adjusting, learning, changing direction. And maybe that's something we should embrace more. I think we put too much pressure on finding the perfect path, but maybe there's no perfect path. Maybe there are just paths that teach us different things, different experience that shape us, different season that reveals different parts of ourselves. There were probably versions of you in the past who couldn't imagine becoming the person you are today. For me, it was like this. And there will always be a future version of you who looks back at the moment and realizes you were doing better than you thought. And I find that kind of comforting because it reminds me that I don't need to have everything figured out right now. I can totally trust the process a little more. I can allow myself to be a beginner. I can allow myself to learn. I can allow myself to change. And that's where real confidence is. Not believing that everything will always go perfectly, but believing that you will be okay even when it doesn't. Because life is always be unpredictable. There will always be things outside of your control. But there are also things we can choose. We can choose how we respond. We can choose what kind of person we want to be, or whether we stay open or become closed off, whether we let difficult experience make us bitter, or whether we allow them to make us wiser. And I think that's where our power is, not in controlling everything, but in learning how to move through everything with curiosity, patience, and with a little more kindness towards ourselves. After talking about all of this, I keep coming back to one question. When everything gets quiet, what actually matters? Not what looks impressive, not what gets the most attention, not what other people expect from us, but what truly matters to us. I think about this question because we spend so much time building our lives. For example, building careers, routines, identities, building the image of who we want people to see us. But sometimes we forget to ask, are we building a life we actually want to live? Or are we just building a life that looks good from the outside? I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting success. I think ambitious can be an amazing thing. Wanting to create something, wanting to improve, wanting to make a difference. Those are beautiful things. But I think success becomes dangerous when it becomes the only thing we value. Because a successful life isn't automatically a meaningful life. You can achieve everything you thought you wanted and still feel empty. You can have a simple life that feels incredibly full. I think about the people I admire most. I think it's not always the people with the biggest achievements. It's often the people who make others feel valued, the people who listen to you, the people who remember small details about what you told them, the people who make time for you, people who are genuinely present in the moment. Those qualities rarely get celebrated online. At least I didn't see a lot of it. But they're some of the most important things a person can have. Because at the end of the day, I don't think we remember people because of their achievements. We remember how they made us feel. We remember conversations. We remember laughter. We remember moments where someone showed up for us. And we remember kindness. And that tells us something. Connection is one of the most meaningful parts of being human. Because no matter how independent we are, we're not meant to go through life completely alone. We need people. We need conversations. We need moments where we feel understood. And I think that's another thing that gets lost in a world full of distractions. Real connection requires presence. We can truly connect with someone while only give them half of our attention. We can build deep relationships if we're always somewhere else mentally. And I know this is something many of us struggle with. Even when we're with people we care about, our minds can be somewhere completely different. We could be thinking about work, about the future, about something we saw online, or about what we need to do tomorrow. And suddenly we're physically there, but emotionally we're somewhere else. I think being present is one of the greatest gifts we can give another person. Because presence says, I'm here, I see you, you matter. And maybe that sounds simple, but simple things are often the things we underestimate. A message to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, a conversation where you actually listen, a moment where you put your phone away and give someone your full attention. These things don't take much effort, but they can mean everything to a person. I also started realizing that many of the moments I value most were not planned. They weren't the moments I prepared for. They weren't the moments I thought would become memories. They were usually so small, like a random conversation, a funny moment with someone, a quiet evening, a walk where I had time to think, a moment where I felt completely at peace. And maybe that's because life isn't experienced in the big moments alone. The big moments are rare: a birthday, graduation, major achievements, important milestones, but the majority of our life happens in between. The ordinary Tuesday morning, the normal conversation, the small choices, the everyday moments that seem insignificant while they're happening. Maybe we need to stop waiting for life to become extraordinary before we allow ourselves to appreciate it. Maybe an ordinary life can still be an extraordinary experience. Maybe happiness is not something we find at the end of a long journey. Maybe it's something we practice along the way, in the way we pay attention, in the way we love people, in the way we take care of ourselves, and in the way we choose to experience the present moment. Because the truth is, we never really know how many ordinary moments we have left. That sounds heavy, but I don't think it means to be scary. I think it meant to be a reminder to notice, to appreciate, to stop rushing through the moments we once wished for. Because someday this exact moment will be a memory. This version of you, this chapter of your life, this ordinary day. And maybe one day you look back and realize you were already living the life you were searching for. I think the biggest lesson I've been learning lately that life is not something we need to constantly escape from. Sometimes we're so focused on reaching the next stage that we forget to appreciate the stage we're currently in. We think, I'll be happy when I achieve this. I relax when the stressful period is over. I finally enjoy life when everything is in place. But what if everything never feels completely in place? What if there will always be something uncertain, something unfinished, something we're still working on? Maybe waiting for the perfect moment means waiting forever. Maybe the goal isn't to create a perfect life. Maybe the goal is to create a life where we can find meaning even when things aren't perfect. Because life will always have difficult moments. There will be disappointments. There will be change. There will be a moment where we question ourselves. But there will also be laughter. There will be unexpected kindness. There will be beautiful conversations. There will be moments where we realize I'm exactly where I need to be. And I think both sides are necessary. The difficult moments teach us, and the beautiful moments remind us why we keep going. One thing I want this podcast to be is a reminder that you're allowed to slow down. You're allowed to question things. You're allowed to take a different path. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to become someone new. Because becoming yourself is not something that happens once. It's something that happens again and again throughout your life. The person you are today is not the final version of you. And honestly, I think that's exciting because it means there's always room to grow, always room to learn, and always room to discover something new about yourself. I don't think curiosity is just about learning facts or gaining knowledge. I think curiosity is also about staying open to life, being curious about people, being curious about experience, being curious about yourself, asking, why do I feel this way? Why do I believe this? What really matters to me? What kind of person do I want to become? Those questions don't always have easy answers, but maybe the questions themselves are valuable. Maybe a meaningful life isn't created by finding all the answers. Maybe it's created by continuing to ask better questions. And that's what I hope to do here on Beyond the Noise. I hope this becomes a place where we can explore those questions together, where we can talk about life, thoughts, emotions, society, relationships, and everything in between. Not because we have everything figured out, but because we're willing to explore, because we're willing to listen, because we're willing to be curious. And if you're all listening right now, I want you to know something. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to compare your journey to someone else's. You don't have to rush because someone else is moving faster. Your life is not late. Your story is not behind. You're not missing the moment just because your path looks different. Sometimes the quiet seasons of life are the ones where the most important things are happening. Sometimes growth is happening when nobody is watching. Sometimes the biggest changes are happening inside you before anyone else can see them. So, wherever you are right now, maybe you're listening during a busy day, maybe you're listening late at night, maybe you're in a moment where you feel completely certain about your future, Or maybe you're in a moment where you have no idea what comes next. Wherever you are, I hope you remember this. You don't have to run through life. You're allowed to experience it. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to breathe. You're allowed to look around and appreciate the fact that you are here. Because this exact moment, will never happen again. And maybe that's what it means to live beyond the noise. Not escaping the world, not ignoring everything around us, but learning what deserves our attention, learning what deserves our energy, learning what deserves our heart. Because the world will always be loud. There will always be another trend, another opinion, another expectation, another reason to feel like you need to be somewhere else. But you get to choose what you listen to. You get to choose what you believe. You get to choose how you experience your own life. And I think that's a powerful thing to remember. So thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to my thoughts. Thank you for giving this podcast a chance. This journey is still just beginning, you know? I don't know exactly where it will go, but I'm excited to find out. And if you're here at the beginning, I'm grateful. So, wherever you are in the world, I hope you take care of yourself. I hope you find moments of quiet. I hope you stay curious. And I hope you ask questions. And I hope, even for a little while, you can step away from all the noise. I'm Ellie, and this was Beyond the Noise. I'll see you in the next episode.